In this lesson, we're going to discuss how to apply texture maps to our geometry inside of 3ds Max. So in the last lesson, we talked about how we can apply materials to a piece of geometry in 3ds Max, and we may have situations where we want to take a picture or an image and apply it to a piece of geometry. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's select our vase, and what I want to do is actually go ahead and open up our material editor. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag in a standard material. You could use really any one that you like, but I'm just going to use standard in this case. And what I want to do is go ahead and double click on my material, and you'll notice that at the bottom of our materials parameters we have this maps rollout. And we have several different map types that we could choose from here. But what I want to talk about just in this lesson, just to keep things nice and simple, is just the diffuse color map section. And the diffuse color map is basically a surface color. Okay, so whenever we apply a map, it's going to appear as the surface color on our geometry. So let's go ahead and click None here. And you'll see that this brings up our material map browser, and the only thing that we have is maps in here. And we have several different types of maps that we could choose from. And these are really just images. Okay? So we could choose bitmap and actually find an image that we've saved off the internet, or an image that we've created in Photoshop or something like that, and we could load it using just bitmap. But in this case, I'm just going to use checker because this is the type of pattern that I want to use. So I'm going to hit OK on this, and you'll see that that checker map has applied itself to our swatch here on our material. And now what I can do is actually go ahead and just assign this to our vase here. Now you'll notice in our scene that this has turned gray, and we cannot see that checkered pattern. And that's because we need to hit this Show Shaded Material in Viewport. This will allow you to see bitmap images on your objects. Okay, so now you'll see that this bitmap has applied itself, this checker pattern has applied itself. Now you'll notice that this is pretty large on our vase, and let's say maybe I want more checkers on this vase. So what I can do is actually go to my materials, and I'm going to click on that map number 0, that checkered, and this will bring me to my maps parameters. And I want to make sure that I'm under my coordinates rollout. I'm just going to scroll down just a little bit, and we're going to go to where it says tiling. Okay? And tiling is basically taking a map that is 1 by 1 dimension, if you want to think of it this way. And tiling it will divide it or multiply it into more of the map. So let me just give you an example of this. On our checker we have 4 squares. So if my tiling is at 1 by 1, we're going to see those 4 squares. So let's take this to 2 by 2, and you'll see that we get 8 squares now. So you can see how this is basically multiplying this map. So let's take this up to 4 in one direction, and then we'll take it to 4 in another, and you'll see how this is now applied several more of this checkered pattern. Okay, so this is kind of a way to get more out of your maps. Okay, so now let's go ahead and close this out here. Let's close our material editor, and you'll see that this checker pattern has applied itself to our vase. But you'll notice that our checkered pattern is kind of twisted on our vase, and maybe this is not exactly what you're looking for. Maybe you want this checkered pattern to be nice and straight along this vase. You don't want it to look like it's been twisted onto this piece of geometry. So what we can do is actually UV this piece of geometry. Okay? And basically what we're doing is we are taking this 3D piece of geometry, and we are trying to convert it to a 2D image format, to where we could basically lay out this image flat on this 3D piece of geometry. Now I know that sounds a little bit confusing, so let's actually get into how we can do it, and maybe that'll make it a little bit more clear. So let's go ahead and go to our Modify panel with our vase selected, and we're going to go to the modifier list. And I'm going to scroll down all the way to the bottom, and I'm going to use a modifier called Unwrap UVW. Now you may not be able to see this because it's off of this capture screen, but it is called Unwrap UVW. So we'll apply that, and you can see that has now applied itself to our modifier stack. Now, what we're doing with the Unwrap UVW is we are telling this 3D piece of geometry how we want it to lay out. If you want to think of it as kind of a cardboard box, whenever let's say you get a case of soda and you've emptied out that box and you want to throw this thing in the trash can, but you've got a little bitty trash can, what are you going to do? You're going to cut that box up and you're going to lay it out flat to where it fits. So that's actually what we're going to be doing here. This is not flat for our 2D image. So what we're going to do is we're going to make some cuts on this to make it seem flat. Now we're not actually going to physically cut this piece of geometry. We're actually just going to cut on its UV coordinates, okay, to basically format it to a 2D image. So let's go ahead and expand this unwrap, and let's go to face mode, and what we're going to do is we're going to select the faces of this UVW map. Now before we do this, I want to go ahead and uncheck this ignore backfacing. So let's select all of our faces on our vase, and you'll notice that this is turned red all the way around. So all of these faces have been selected. And let's go to our Open UV Editor. And I just want to show you what this looks like. As of right now, by default, this is what your 3D piece of geometry, your vase, looks like in its 2D format. You'll notice that we've got a lot of these weird twisting and odd lines. Let me go ahead and check this button here to turn off that checker pattern in the background, so it might be a little bit easier to see. And you'll see that this is very jumbled. So what we want to do is actually flatten this out nice and neat so an image can be applied to it flat. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let me move this over here. I didn't realize I was off the capture screen there. Now you can see this a little bit easier. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually close this for right now. We'll come back to this here in just a moment. So let's close that. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually tell 3ds Max how to unwrap this piece of geometry. And we're going to scroll down to our projection rollout. And we have these different methods of unwrapping our geometry. Now, seeing how this vase is a cylindrical shape, we're going to choose our cylindrical map type. Okay, so let's click on that, and you'll automatically see that checkered pattern has changed and flattened itself out a little more evenly on this vase. Now you'll also notice that we have this green seam, and this is where our geometry, or our UVW, is being cut to be laid out flat in our UVW editor. So let's go back to that. Let's scroll up to the top and let's go to Open UVW Editor. And now you'll see that this geometry has been laid out nice and flat. We don't have any of that weird twisting geometry going out. Now, this may not be the prettiest looking UVW. If you want to learn more about UVWs and the proper way to UVW editing, I would really suggest getting started with UVs in 3ds Max 2011. That's a really great lesson to follow through if you want to understand more about UVs. So let's go ahead and close out our UVW editor, and let's turn off face mode. We're just going to collapse that Unwrap UVW and just kind of take a look at how this is unwrapped on our vase. Now, before, the texture map was all twisted in one direction, and what we were looking for was our checker pattern to be more straight up and down like this, a little more clean, if you will. So we use that unwrap UVW modifier to flatten that out and make it look a little bit neater. Alright, so what we're going to do in the next lesson is we're going to render out this scene and basically get an image or an animation from our render.